Hey everybody, California Times here. This is me. I'm Guy Meyer. I'm with Amy Kalish. And once again, we're talking about our beautiful state of California and the housing issues that we are facing. And Amy, who is on the Tamalpais Design Review Board in the county of Marin and also has a website, is a voice of sanity and survival in California with her wakeca.org website as well as citizenmarin.org. Is that right, Amy? Did I get it right there?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, Amy. Good to have you connected again. So you were just giving me the lowdown about your busy schedule, and among the other things that you were delving into was a Tahoe evacuation report. What's going on with that?
Well, the evacuation study came out a few months ago, but it seems like the news has just picked it up. And I think that's because a lot of new developments are planned and they're trying to get approval. And as it stands now, evacuating the basin would take 14 hours. And they estimate that 99% of all the structures there are at risk. That basically means that your survival possibility is pretty minimal if a fast-moving fire comes through and you have a traffic jam that goes all around the lake, all the feeder roads that are going into that one area trying to get out. You'd be sitting in smoke the whole time. What's interesting is the fire chief that's at Fallen Leaf Lake seems to be very comfortable discussing how dangerous this is. But when you get to the larger fire departments around where the developments would be, they are saying that this is way overblown. And I find that to be actually laughable because it's not overblown. If you want to start at where we are now, which is no fire, and then fire, you can obviously see what will happen if a lot of people need to get out of there. There's just this makes no sense to me. But it's something that you see all across California, which is that fire departments seem almost to have a gag order where they're not supposed to discuss housing and the impact of more housing and the evacuation potential of an area. So I was a little disappointed, but not completely surprised when there was pushback against this evacuation study.
It does seem amazing to me that Tahoe is even still being developed, that there's more room for development from what I understand, just the everyday in and egress in and out for all the holiday vacationers is pretty, what can we say, an event that they don't necessarily look forward to getting in there.
It's completely true, and the reality is on the California side, they have a certain number of permits that they'll issue each year for a home, but there is no restriction when it comes to a major development. So if you wanted to have a new resort, you can still propose that, and it wouldn't be subject to the other restriction. But when you add a new resort and you're adding, let's say, 3,000 people coming in and out of one road that ends somewhere, you're adding that many people to an evacuation. It's really something that needs to be considered. And in most of the scenarios that you see, when they try to add a development or they try to see what the impact of the development would be, they take things piecemeal and they never take into account all of the developments being considered. That's actually what's going on in Sonoma, around the Sonoma Developmental Center, is that there's 6 different projects. But when they do an impact study, they'll only look at the one that's being considered at a time. So the Tahoe study should be an enormous wake-up for people that you could have mass casualties if there's a fire up there and you have wind on the scale of what we've been seeing lately.
Yeah, that's the level of which what you might think of as if there was like an environmental organization or movement or organization that existed in Tahoe, which I'm sure there certainly was, and I'm not sure what it exists now, but the whole question is no longer about just preserving the beauty of localities. It's the lethality of the potential lethality of what they're proposing and their disregard for, in spite of all the evidence of what California does, that they want more and more still.
It used to be that they would hold back the number of permits based on the amount of water that was available. But now it seems when you have as many large scale luxury developments as you have now, none of that seems to be taken into consideration.
All right, I'm gonna slight pause here. I got, I don't know if my door is open here. We're gonna have a little cut. I gotta, there's too much noise in the background going on.
Okay.
In 1 second, we can step away. Just, all right. My apologies, guys. I didn't have my door shut, but I am in here, so keep it down. Ay, 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 ay. You know, I think our audio recording is safe from that. You probably didn't hear it in the background, did you?
Anything.
Good. I think it wasn't going to be recorded, but unfortunately it was like I was hearing it as I was hearing you, and I didn't really want to hear it. So, all right, got the door shut. Told the people on the next room to quiet. Now I got to put this back on. Okay. Well, let's see. Are we back there at the levels of again? I guess so. So we were just talking about the Tahoe and a report in Tahoe, and I suppose one could do again. The concept is, what about all of Marin County? What's going on totally in Marin County, or just the pockets of the Ross Valley? But now we're not even allowed to look at that. Apparently, communities, right, where we don't no longer have that what was called police power. That was our right to protect our local communities. Correct?
Yeah, the developments are supposed to have, if they have an effect on health and safety, they're supposed to be, a way to withdraw them. But that doesn't mean safety about things that could happen in the future. Something has to be happening right then. It's safety hazard, like a big hole in the ground. That's kind of the way that things are measured. So health and safety doesn't take into account any of this evacuation issue. And it's especially galling because we have the attitude from the state that for some reason one size fits all here, so that you can just fit 15% more housing in every community without looking at it. In Sausalito, they're having trouble with their 740 units that they're supposed to site. And there was a very offensive piece of journalism or opinion piece that came out from the Chronicle last week, saying that the city of Sausalito was the most NIMBY city ever. And it talked about all the shenanigans that they're going through. And never does it mention that there is basically one major road that is filled with tourists in the summer, absolutely filled, that there are very few buildable lots left. And there are concerns that the city has and concerns that the residents have about adding a tremendous amount of housing. And that housing that has been proposed, the first piece was like to set it right on top of historic buildings in the historic district. And on its face, that's just ridiculous. I mean, the whole point of Sausalito's economy is that it's a beautiful tourist location and attraction. And the amount of housing that was going to go in there, something like 46 luxury condos, and 6 of them would be available to low income, which here is, what, $98,000 to $140,000 a year or something. So the city doesn't need that amount of traffic and that amount of new people living there without any place to park anyway. And if there was an actual issue, if a fire came up, and there was, especially with wind, there are so many older structures up there that are very vulnerable to fire. The new ones aren't as vulnerable, but you just have a conflagration and a tremendous heat. Everything can just go up, and people will not be able to get out. So when I hear about how NIMBY this city is, it's like, we need to stop using that word and look at why people might be resisting putting in massive amounts of housing, and what the actual consequences to their community would be, and stop blaming them for being hesitant to put in things that they can't handle.
That's their MO, and even if there was some element of somebody being whatever racially offended, you're getting at the point that is, I mean, we are just destroying the beauty of California. We are really turning. We're just so blind. It's stunning that we could just think of doing this to the coast, California coast, for instance, or Sausalito.
Well, all the new laws this time around seem to be focused on getting rid of CEQA and the Coastal Commission because they're inhibitors to housing. And one thing that's especially irritating about that is the Coastal Commission is being blamed for the lack of affordable housing on the coast. But I think it was in 1986 that was removed from their purview, that they were no longer allowed to have any say over affordable housing. So even if they had wanted to, that was not something that they could be involved in. So it's being used as kind of this weird kind of cudgel to say that they're anti-affordable housing when it is not something that they've actually been allowed to address since 1986, I believe.
You made a statement in a written piece. Maybe it was something that maybe it was a message to me, but I think it was a message that's part of your own communications. That, and it's a radical message, but it seems so necessary that somehow California has an obligation, or at least it appears that the Democrats or Governor Newsom sees that we have this obligation to take on, as you put it, accommodate an endless amount of people who want to move to California. That this is somehow our duty to do this, or do you?
Well, the number that was first brought up for the next 8-year cycle was from Newsom during his campaign, and it was 3.5 million, which apparently was based on nothing. Later, he said it was an aspirational number. Then the HCD, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, reduced the number to 2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And when you ask the Department of Finance in California what the population will be like in 8 years, it's flat. When you ask them what it would be like out to 2060, it's flat. And this is before we lost 55,000 tech jobs in the last couple of years just up here. This is before massive cuts have been, are starting to come our way now from the federal government cutting back on jobs. But also, cities like Los Angeles, a lot of cities are very close to the edge of bankruptcy right now. And their response to that is to lay people off. So when people are laid off and they're looking for housing that they can afford, or they have to leave California, they're not looking for the kind of housing that's being built. That might attract new people who have money to California, but they aren't coming here for jobs. They aren't coming here to help our economy. They might be buying a second home or something else, but the actual need is not being addressed by any of these numbers at all. And when a development is proposed, if it wants to take advantage of density bonuses, and maybe they're supposed to add 20% of their units at below market rate, that's the starting point. Then once they start getting a density bonus, it only increases the number of market rate units to the point where a 20% can start dropping down to 10 or below 10, because those units never have to go up in number. The percentage of units overall goes up, but it never affects the ones at the bottom. So there's nothing about this policy that helps people that either have less income or have been struggling with the small income that they've had. When we have job growth now, it's in jobs that don't pay very well. We're losing most of our really good paying jobs. The income inequality is skewed even worse now. People at the very top are making much more, and the people at the bottom are working 2 and 3 jobs to get by. They cannot afford the housing that's being built. And California redevelopment agencies that used to do this between 1946 to 2012, they used to develop workforce housing and community development that would actually bring in business and create something economically feasible for a city and help, and was put together with cooperation from a city. That got shut off in 2012. So the state of California has not built anything since 2012. They don't participate in that. They're expecting the private industries to do that, and they're only going to do it for profit. So that's the situation that we're in. That's why all of these laws are constructed the way that they are.
And
they're for-profit laws.
But they are designed to drive the industry in some way. The goal is, there's 2.5 million houses for the, I say, supposed housing crisis. To me, I just feel like we're on a environmental or common sense crisis on the planet in general. But I think California, if we were the leaders of the world, supposedly for innovation and everything else, we're at the top of being the ignorant leaders right now, or leading the world in the wrong direction.
We're being punished for the beauty that we have now, and it's very specific. If you look at Marin County, we have a vast amount of land that's been set aside here as open space, or it's been set aside as farmland, or it's actually too dangerous to build on because of landslides or fire, or many of the other issues that we have here. People just look at this area and think, oh, it should just be filled with homes. Well, there aren't any jobs here. So if you want people, we have jobs here that we have teachers, we have first responders jobs. We don't have any major employers that aren't our actual city government's responsibility. We used to, but we don't anymore. And there's no one coming here to do it. So what are we building for? Many of the developments that in the past 10 years that have come up, they're empty, in some part. And if you look at San Francisco, Park Merced, which is the largest development there, I think it's 3,600 units, it's going bankrupt now. It's not filled. They cannot keep it going. They have minimally 15% vacancy all the time, and it dropped way lower. Vacancy rate was much higher just a couple of years ago than that. And yet, on the other side of San Francisco State, they're building a new development that has the exact same number of units, that's new. So if you want to say you have a housing crisis and you have actual buildings that aren't filled with people, that's on one side of San Francisco State, why are you saying you need to add the same number of units on the other side when those units are going to cost $1 million a piece to build? Who's going to be living in them? None of this is making any sense.
We are being punished on so many different levels. I mean, you talk about adding to the level the cost of every local government to keep up with the requirements to stay legal. That's millions of dollars of tax of citizen money, and the citizens no longer have the power to object to any of it. They're being
Right.
the money's being stolen. The whole RENA thing, I think, needs to come to an end. I think it's a theory that might have been relatively benign at one point in time, but has taken on a level of such irresponsibility or ineptness that it's just should be pulled. The plug should be pulled on it right now.
It's utterly abusive, and the during the audit of RENA a couple of years ago, the defense of RENA was that if cities are assigned too high RENA, the consequences to them are trivial. And as we can see, our cities have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to create the documents that RENA requires. So the housing elements that our cities are struggling to put together are extremely expensive. And every time they're rejected, you have to go back to the drawing board and produce more paperwork to satisfy the state. And while you're doing that, you're exposed to builder's remedy and other punishments. The city of Los Angeles right now is almost $1 billion off of their where their budget needs to be, and they need to cut stuff, and they're looking at where they're going to cut. A lot of their money was funneled into homeless programs that were never tracked. Nobody knows what happened to the money. The issues are not fixed. The amount of money that's being wasted trying to solve these problems like haphazardly is bizarre. And a lot of cities are finding that the money that they put aside to actually participate in low-income housing production had to be siphoned off and put into emergency homelessness issues. And the state acts as if the homeless issues are each city's responsibility, when that is something that has no barrier. People that are homeless can move wherever they please. But for some reason, the city's responsible financially to make sure that people have a place to live, and they are not given money to do this. So, and there was legislation that would have required the state to actually audit and monitor their own homeless spending to see where it was going and if it was effective. And that was vetoed. But yet, there's a lot of regulation now coming down to see how cities are spending their money to do the same thing. No one has come up with any kind of solution that's working.
Well, there are a number of organizations. I know you're working on it. I just was looking at Nextdoor, and let's see if it'll pop up. Well, no, I guess. Well, we can have a picture of Gavin Newsom for a second here, who's got a new podcast. This is Gavin Newsom. But just looking for, well, let me go back to ourselves on the screen. And anyways, California is trying to, we are needing to pull ourselves together. We really need a complete change of power back to the people, I think. The same talk was going on with my conversations with the folks down in Moss Landing, and what the lithium battery storage facilities that are being almost mandated. I'm not saying they are being mandated, but communities don't have the power that they used to have, perhaps, to say no to this stuff. We're just
No, it's foisted on them. And at the same time, the cities may not have enough space to accommodate their arena. They're also not able to keep things like large warehouse spaces or um, other kinds of, God, what was it called for when the tech hubs and cooling stuff? Sorry, you're gonna have to totally edit that part out.
no worry.
Developments like this taking up whatever land is left, and it's not usable for housing. I mean, it's basically, they're server farms. That's what it's called. So server farms, basically large ones, can just show up maybe in the area where maybe there should have been housing, and now you don't have that space for housing because you have a server farm. There is one project where PG&E is trying to use, PG&E and a developer trying to integrate a server farm into a housing development to try to use the excess heat that the server farm is producing to heat the development, which is kind of an interesting project. But those kinds of projects are unusual in that they are, creative. You don't see that much creativity going on. One of the reasons that RENA is so bizarre is that if you need 2.5 million units because you're assuming that you need to accommodate, let's say, families or singles or whatever, they don't count by the bedroom. They don't count by the number of people that are served by each building. It could be a studio. It could be a 5-bedroom house. They're not counting by the number of people.
Oh, really?
They're only, no. And in fact, it's worse than that. There's a development in Strawberry that had, once they had their density bonuses, they were allowed, I think, 72 units. So what they did was they built 71 units as condominiums or apartments. And they took that last unit, that 72nd unit, and they made like a 53 bed care facility. Because if you're sharing a space and there's only one kitchen, that's one unit, no matter how many people live in it. So if you look at a dorm, every time Berkeley puts in a dormitory, if every unit doesn't have its own kitchen and bathroom, the whole building is one unit.
Well, I guess to me it goes back to what I think I learned or absorbed somehow back in college 50 years ago about the impending population crisis on the planet, and how, or even junior high school, my social studies teacher would make jokes about how in China it's all about how many widgets we can sell. And it's like every human body represents just dollars for everybody.
Units.
It's like we're all just units. And we have to expand. I feel like there's some kind of internal, when I say internal, I think maybe it's inside an individual, me or you, or maybe some young person, or maybe inside us as a group, that we need to have a new sense of something brand new has to come through, sense of identity, sense of responsibility to the planet, and not give up on this.
It's community. We used to have that. Community now is denigrated because now community somehow is
a threat.
It's not. Community is looked upon as being isolating, and that nobody's allowed into your community. The language around community is being struck as being racist